few people. I can see folks signing in. We've got a great turnout. We're almost hit a little bit, almost to 20 right now, and a couple more that look like they're coming on. If you've never done one of these before, because I remember I'd been on a call like this and had never done a webinar like this, a few housekeeping items I'll let you know. We're going to go through our presentation, and we've got some objectives and an outline. But there's the ability for you during the presentation to ask us questions or to get clarification. And there's a couple ways that you can do that. You should see a question option. If you have the control panel for the GoToWebinar and you're going down, you should see some options like audio or webcam, or you won't see all of these, or polls or handouts. There's a chat function. There's a question function. And you can type in a question at any point, and Abby and I will be able to see that. So if we're going through a slide and you want us to slow down, or you would like us to, to clarify something that we said, you can type a question in the question box, and we'll be able to see that. The other option you have is there's a chat function, and I just had messaged the group a minute ago that just said, hey, or hello and welcome. We will start the broadcast in a couple of minutes, and the and then you can chat in, or you can send your question to that, and everybody can see that. And we are perfectly happy to get questions during the presentation. We'll have the ability to get questions after the presentation as well. And the weird thing for us and the weird thing for you will be, like, we'll be talking, and we have, usually when you do a presentation at a conference, you can see people's faces, so you can see how people are reacting to things and if they have questions. Of course, during this, we can't see that, so it'll be awkward for us. So just feel free to type in a question, and we will not be upset if you want to do that. There's a question I see that, will we be able to get a copy of the presentation? Yes, we'll make a presentation copy available to everyone. And I'll figure out how to do that. We've got a list of people that are here, and I may even be able to upload it here in a few minutes, but we can get you a copy of the presentation. Abby, do you want to cover the objectives?
Yeah, so our hope is that we can provide a basic overview of our facility terms and concepts for live-in professionals. And we're not at any point saying that we are the experts on this, but Josh and I have both gone through the Res Life experience. We've been live-in professionals, and now we are working in the facilities and operations world. And so we are really hoping that we can share some important information with you to give you just a tip of the iceberg of facilities for you, and that you would have a basic knowledge, since you are often the first responders to facilities situations. And then they're really just our tips and tricks and info to make you a more rounded housing professional in the area of facilities.
The format for our presentation is we've come up with some topics that we think are most relevant to live-in professionals, or even if you're living out but you're still really working with the staff that lives in. We think some of these topics are really important. And then what we're going to do is we'll kind of cover a topic and then give you some tips for how you can use the information or how you can work within that topic area. So an example is we're going to talk about HVAC, and so we'll tell you a little bit about HVAC systems and how they are set up in residence halls, and then what you can do if you're in a bind and you're waiting on your facilities team to come and respond. And then, of course, we are open for questions at the end or during the presentation. So we will go ahead and get started.
So the first thing that we want to talk with you about are appliances, and it's important that you really know the appliances in your buildings, and they're all different appliances that could be going on. You could have a refrigerator, an AC unit, a furnace, a washer, dryer, a microwave, a stove, a dishwasher. And they're all going to be fun and quirky to deal with, but you should really be working with your custodial and maintenance staff to ensure that appliances are being cleaned and maintained. And that might mean that, when you have off times when those appliances aren't being used, that you are For example, at our institution, we blow out refrigerators every other year, and that means taking vacuums and cleaning out all of the dust and debris that gets into them so they last longer, or changing filters of furnaces, or even something as simple as replacing a vent cover that breaks off of a microwave. And so knowing that these things affect our students, and so even if it's a cosmetic issue, that we're going in and working with our maintenance staff to get that fixed, and then making sure that when your custodial staff is cleaning or you're going through different appliances before you open even, that it looks clean and it looks new to them. And you also will have to educate your students on how to properly maintain appliances during the school year. Cleaning out the lint trap on a dryer, I know we've all had students who have no idea what they're doing when it even comes to laundry, and so explaining that to them, or also the importance of contacting staff when an appliance isn't working. I think so often they sit there expecting us to read their minds or to know that their microwave is sparking, and we don't know that. And so really helping them understand those lines of communication on how to get assistance. It would also be really good for you to talk with your supervisor about the replacement schedule for your appliances in your area. Do you have a standard timeline of when appliances are replaced? Do you know that you replace, if you have individual air conditioner units in a room, do you replace it a certain, after 10 years, or do you wait until the item can be fixed? In my institution, I know we tried to do it until we use those appliances until they can't be used anymore, and just so knowing what that looks like. And then you also may have to work with a vendor for appliance care and maintenance. If you have a third-party vendor for your washer and dryer, knowing who you need to contact and who you need to call to get that assistance. And then our tips for appliances is you need to know the tips and tricks for your appliances in your building. They're going to be different in each area, and so it will be important for you to know the things that they need to know on how to make things work. And again, educating residents on how to properly use those appliances. Do they know what not overloading a washer means? Or I think everyone just thinks the popcorn button is like the magic popper, and so making sure that they're not burning things and creating bigger issues. And then I would also make notes of appliances that are replaced, so you have an understanding of, okay, last year this refrigerator was placed, and if it's acting funky, then that means that it shouldn't be because it's brand new. Or have you repeatedly made requests for maintenance on a certain appliance? Even if it's not an appliance but a toilet, if you've had to put the same request in for a toilet 3 or 4 times, is there something else that's going on? And then knowing who you're supposed to call for assistance will be important. Are you calling your maintenance staff or a vendor? Where do you draw a line for certain appliances? I've had it in multiple schools where, your physical plant staff can turn off the water that leads to a washer, but if the hose is broken, then you have to call the vendor. And so knowing where those lines are and making sure you're contacting the appropriate people.
Thank you, Abby. The next topic we're going to cover are capital improvement solutions, and kind of the basics of those. And you may also, I titled this one solutions, but really what we're talking about are capital improvement projects. And these are projects that usually occur on an annual basis, and they help us improve the residence halls. They are budgeted several years in advance and may require university architect involvement and approval. And so, like on our campus, what we have is a financial threshold of when we have to involve our university architects. And so a good example, if we wanted to go in and if we wanted to paint all of our rooms in a building and use a university approved paint color, then we could just do that. But if we wanted to go into a building and try a new paint color, then we would have to get architectural approval from our university at the central level. And so every school is going to be a little bit different, and every housing, depending on if you're public or private, depending on how you're set up. But typically these projects require a good deal of coordination and a good deal of planning. The other thing is, if you've ever heard the term R&R, it's a reserve account. But typically what universities will do or require, especially if you're a public school and you have a housing program that's an auxiliary, is you have to set aside a certain amount of money every year that you budget to set aside for capital improvement projects, and that's how you fund these projects. So when you're doing a capital improvement project, you're not using bonded money or a loan from a bank. Typically, you're using money that you saved and you set aside in your department to make sure that you could spend the money. And so, if you can do it for less than what you set aside, that's great, because that means you can get more done. Projects are interesting because, and I kind of hinted at this, but you may be able to do this with your own facility team, or you may need a general contractor, and it really depends on the scope of work. Let's say that you have a couple of rooms in a residence hall that have a door between them, and maybe you used it for those 2 rooms as an office, but you're like, gosh, our entire housing program is sold out. If we drywalled off the door between these 2 rooms, since they have exterior doors to the hallway, we could create 2 additional spaces. You may be able to do something like that in-house, because taking a door off and putting some drywall in and securing that up isn't a huge project. But let's say you wanted to gut a whole wing and create apartments in an area. Well, that's something where you're going to need to get approval from somebody that can talk about structural engineering and to make sure you're not going to mess up, how you've set up your heating and cooling and your electrical kind of components that go in a room. So it just depends on the scope of your project. Our rule of thumb here is when we don't really know, or we're worried, we're going to ask the experts on our campus that approve projects, because what you don't want to do is complete a project without the proper folks involved and then get yourself in trouble. That can really get, especially if you're talking about fire code or you're talking about building code, it can get you in a lot of trouble. Some examples of capital improvement projects that you may have seen on your campus, and these are examples that we've used on ours: roof replacement, tuck pointing, which is around your building underneath your roof. There's all these little grooves that water can get into, and so this is addressing those and sealing those up and making sure you don't get water into your building and your spaces. Lobby renovations, fire alarm replacements, installation of heating and cooling, painting, carpet replacement, furniture replacement. If you have a center desk or a community desk, those kind of updates, bathroom renovations, and et cetera, you could think about a bunch of those. But those are all projects typically that are not new building type projects, but they're things you do to keep a residence hall relevant and looking good. Some tips, and then I'm going to show you an example of a project, and I've got my screen with asleep here. Some tips for our live-in professionals, and I'll tell you, my role as associate director is to supervise, the assistant directors who manage our residence life. And I am always asking our hall directors, and they're called residence coordinators on our campus, but I'm always asking them, what can we do to make your building better? And I'm hoping that they're going to tell me something facility related, because that's what I use. I want to know what the students in the residence halls are complaining about, what they don't like, so that we can come in the summer and address it and make it better, or sometimes come in during the middle of the year and make it better. So what I would suggest is know your building from top to bottom, kind of including what's old, what doesn't work well, what's the condition of your student rooms, what's the condition of your furniture, what are students complaining about, what are parents complaining about, because I'll tell you what they're doing right now, and I don't know if they're doing it to you, but they're doing it to me, maybe not me personally, but they are taking pictures of things in residence halls and putting it in the class of pages, they're putting it in the parent groups, and they're saying, I don't like this. And so, we could look at that and say, gosh, they're mean, or we could look at that and say, you know what, they're right, and we should do something. And so what we typically will do is, if we think there's a valid complaint, we're going to go through and fix that right away. But what I would like to do is make sure that our hall directors that live in those buildings tell us about those things before it gets there, because then we can fix it and not get ourselves embarrassed on social media, which tends to be the way people try to go about getting things done. Every couple of weeks, I don't know, everybody's got a different level of relationship with their central housing office, but you can always talk to your supervisor about projects that could be completed in your building and area. Never turned down an opportunity to participate in a capital improvement project discussion or meeting. When I was a hall director, my first job was down at the University of Georgia, and the director of housing would invite me, and we had an area coordinator, to come to these meetings. And when I was a hall director, I was so much more concerned about the RAs and the residents and what was going on that I oftentimes did not want to go. But in the back of my mind, and due to my supervisor being a good coach, he always said, no, Jess, you need to come to these things. The way you impress our director, who you only see maybe once a month, is to know the facility part of your building and to know what could make it better. Because people in these director roles really want to know that, and they really they value the living professional. Whether you have 1 year experience, whether you have 10 years of experience living in, we are relying on you all who live there to let us know what we can do better. Because you may be responsible for one building, your person that's running your department may be responsible for 30 buildings, and they can't see everything. And so that's where we really rely on those live-in staff members. It's also when you impress your director with some sort of advice about a project and it's really relevant, it really puts you in a position to get a promotion either at your school or maybe at a different school. Like I said, your housing leadership is definitely going to be interested. And if you get in that position, make sure you're ready to make those. I would carry around in my notebook a list of things I thought we could do to make things better, and that way if I got asked, I could just turn to that page and say something about it. An interesting project we did, I'm going to show you some pictures. So we have a building, it's called Ball Residence Hall. It was built in 1928. We need about $30 million to renovate this building. We don't have that available to us in our cash reserves. So we specifically targeted things that would make this building look better, that didn't break our budget. And so we did this lobby renovation. And so on the left-hand side of your screen, you can see kind of a dated lobby. I called that on the left. It's on the left side of my screen. Probably, I think it's on yours too. I get confused with directions when we're on the phone. But you'll see a wooden-looking structure with a glass, looks like a gas station glass at 3 o'clock in the morning. That was the model that we had there in the old lighting. And we spent probably about $500,000 on this project. We changed out all the flooring. We took that glass down. The little wall with the TV on it, we blew that wall out. We increased the size of the entryway. The wood we kept because it was nice, but we polished it up, put a new countertop on, and you got a really good bang for your buck walking into this old building. And so you can see that was what you saw on the left-hand side prior to the renovation project, and this was what you saw when it was done. And it's a dramatic difference in that building. We put in some really nice LVT, which is luxury vinyl tile, in the back. You can see by the fireplace that it looks like wood, but it's a really nice tile product. And then we got a new runoff rug right in front of the tile that we used and the walkway there. And so this made a huge difference. We also installed, we couldn't air condition the entire building because it's a building that doesn't have AC. But what we did was we air conditioned this lobby with central air and heat, and then students can go down there and get a little bit of relief from the hot weather that we're having in the last few days. You can see again the old carpet we had in there replaced with the LVT. We put some nicer tables in there, and really we repainted it and really cleaned that space up. And you can see we put ceiling fans in instead of this old chandelier lighting. And this building, even though we didn't do a major renovation project, it's much, much better received because of this entryway that you go through. In the student rooms, we did some easy things. On the left, this was 2 years ago, we had this old wooden furniture from the 60s in there, and we hadn't done much with those terrazzo floors. That floor that you see, it's called terrazzo. That was installed when the building was built in the 20s. The great thing about that product is if you shine it up and polish it, then it looks really good. And so we repaired the window blinds, we changed out the furniture to something modern, and we polished up the floor and we painted the room. And that was part of that capital improvement. And we could do all of that because it didn't require any major architectural innovation. The furniture we had to get approval for, but the rest of it we did in-house. And so when you walked into Ball Hall in 2012, you saw the old lobby and a room with that old wooden furniture. And hopefully we didn't leave it blind that way. But when you walked in 2013 in the fall, you saw that, and it was a huge difference for us. So that's a good example of how a capital improvement project can impact your building. And I kid you not, where we got this is I had the hall director go to her hall council meetings and get a list of all the things we could do in Ball Residence Hall to make it look better. And that's the list we worked from. So they mentioned bathrooms, and I don't have any pictures of those in this presentation, but we did some work on bathrooms, we did some work on the lobby, we did a lot of work on the student rooms. But it was all driven by the resident hall coordinator that told me what they would like to be done. And we did it because that was, the people that are living there are the most important people, including the staff. So you're going to have to listen to me again. Woohoo! And if I was in person, you'd see me smile and do some sort of awkward movement. So if you know me, some of you, I can see that I know you, so you can picture me doing an awkward movement. If you don't know me, Google me, and you might find some awkward picture of me doing something, because I've worked in housing for a long time. And so we do lots of icebreakers, and people like to put pictures up. So let's talk about facility emergency response. This is something I know you all deal with every day. If you're in housing, you're dealing with something every day, because when people live in buildings, they break things or things break. It's really important, I think, to know what's an emergency and what's not, and how these are managed, and how that's managed makes or breaks a housing program. I'm going to show you an example with some photos and a couple slides of a water pipe burst we had and what we had to do to remedy that situation. And that was all, it got handled really well. Every bit of it got handled well because the Residence Life team responded really well and very quickly. So some common, what I would call emergencies, and so when you're doing facility work, there's things that you're going to send people out for, and there's things that you're not, and you're kind of drawing a line of what you think needs to be handled. Fire, you're always sending your team out for a fire. Floods, you never want water standing in places. You always want to get water up. You always want to get water where it can't get into places and create mold problem or create a rot or kind of a deterioration problem. Loss of power, loss of heat in cold weather, loss of air conditioning in extreme weather. Loss of AC for us on our campus is not always an emergency. If it's 70 degrees outside and you lost your air conditioning, we're probably not sending somebody in after hours. If it's 105 degrees in the middle of the summer, you better believe we're sending somebody in to get that air conditioning going. And so we treat AC a little bit differently than we do heat, because heat, you always need to have that in cold weather. But air conditioning, when you're in the 70s, 60s and 70s, it's a little bit more gray area. And every program does it differently, but we sort of draw a line with AC in terms of how hot is it and how can we handle that. Security issues, a broken window, a door, life safety, loss of steam or chilled water. And if you don't know what those are, I know I didn't know what those were. Steam often is what is going to give you hot water in your buildings. It may give you heat if you have steam heat like we have in some of our buildings. That's what gets you all that heat. And the chilled water is what's giving you your domestic water supply. So or air conditioning, and if those go out, you got a big problem because you don't have heat. You may not have water supply. You may not have some other things that you would need. Bodily fluids, you don't want to leave things that could cause a problem for others out. So maybe blood, puke, things like that. Urine, unfortunately poop. If we were in a room, I think we would all have an awkward laugh about that one. But we always have a mad crapper, it seems. And I don't know if you guys have ever, we call them the mad crappers, but every year there's somebody that likes to do that in a restroom or a hallway, and we're like, why? Why do we have a mad crapper in our residence halls? Weather emergencies, depending on what they are. If you have a bunch of snow, you got to get it removed. If you have cold weather and your pipes freeze, there's all kinds of weather-related issues that could cause you to have an emergency. Plumbing, that's a big one if somebody backs up the toilets or backs up the showers. And bed bugs. We treat bed bugs as an emergency not because they're going to hurt anybody, but because the negative impact on your housing program, if the perception is you're not doing anything about it. People will go to the media and start complaining or go to social media. And so we handle the bed bugs really aggressively, and it's actually in our emergency protocol because we're averse to negative publicity at our school, and we don't want people to think we're not handling stuff that happens. So if you everybody's got a different relationship with their facility folks on campus, and so you may or may not know this. I've had a different relationship I've worked on 4 campuses, and everyone's been different. But I will guarantee you, whoever you're working with has these people in their kind of their Rolodex or their phone I guess we don't use Rolodexes, but they have them in their iPhone contact list or whatever you guys keep to make sure that you can get help in crisis situations. So typically you're going to have a restoration company that's going to come out. If you can't do it in-house, in our program we can't do some things in-house, so we have a relationship with a restoration company. We have a relationship with private contractors who can come do drywall repair and painting. In flooring, we've got a window and door repair company. We have a roof repair company, a plumbing company. We have a contract with electrical company. We have our own locksmith on campus. We've got 2 different pest control companies we work with, and then we've got HVAC specialists that we work with both on campus and as contractors. And what I know is that if we have a problem at 3 o'clock in the morning, and the hall director typically gets called by the RA, when they call our facility person, they're going to dispatch the right person. And we've got relationships with all these folks so that when we do have a problem, they're coming. You know, we call, they come. And that's the way you really want it to work, because there's nothing worse than being in an emergency situation and going, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? Do they know what to do? You know, this is something I will guarantee you that if you have a facilities person in place, they know this. And so you got to trust them a little bit to have this. And if you don't have it, it's something that you as a live-in professional could start working on, because they're vital. And so I'm going to show you a couple pictures. Well, actually, I'm going to give you some tips, and I'll show you some pictures. What I tell our live-in staff is always, always, always go to the scene. You know, we have got, unless your physical safety is compromised, you have to go look at the facility emergency, because often our staff don't represent those in a way that makes sense or that is actually accurate. Educate yourself on your department plan. Build relationships with your facilities team. There's a typo there, I apologize. Devise a plan prior to an emergency. Stay in communication with the residents. One thing that we do when we have a residence displaced is we set up a schedule of communication that they know when they're going to hear from us, and we never just do verbal. Any communication is followed up with written communication, because in a facility issue that lasts several days, and early on in that, they will be good, and they will be good with you. 5 or 6 days later, if they don't have what they think they should have, they're blowing you up on social media, their parents are calling. And so when we get into an emergency situation, we always follow up every single communication that we've had verbally with written communication, and we schedule that out to happen every couple of days. And then don't freak out. These things happen. You can do everything in the world to try to prevent a facility issue from occurring, and something's going to happen. I mean, it's part of housing, so don't freak out about it. Here's one that was maybe the biggest one I've ever dealt with. We had a sprinkler. Those are sprinkler pipes, PVC pipe that you see on the left-hand side of your screen. We had a big cold temperature drop a couple years ago. On the outside of a whole block of buildings, they put these underneath a vent. The vent was bringing in cold air. It froze all these pipes. When the temperature got warm, it burst pipes in 4 different buildings, and you can see the water. You can just see it. You can see it in the ceiling. You can see it on the floors. We had 37 people displaced at 3 o'clock in the morning, and it was, I think, at that point, it was 0 degrees outside. But the pipes had warmed up enough with the heat during the day, and they just burst in the middle of the night. This was a 2-month process to remedy, and you can see this is some of the equipment we had to use. You can see we had fans, and we had devices that were sucking water out of the carpet. That little spider-looking thing, there was so much water in the ceilings that the only way to salvage the ceiling was to take this device and blow the air up and try to get that dry before mold set in. If you look at that middle picture, there was water in the outlet or in the light for the room. I mean, that's actually water that came through, and so there was a danger there with the shorting out of the electrical. We had to cut out ceiling. And you can see when we had to cut out the ceiling in a lot of these rooms and redo it all. Major catastrophe. But we were all there at 3 o'clock in the morning, moving people. We had a contract with a hotel. We got people to a hotel. So this was massive. But it took all those contractors I just showed you, and I'll go back, you know, all the people that I was talking about. We had the restoration company. We had the drywall repair. We had the plumbing company out. So we had all those folks out to look at that. So these things do happen, and you probably have enough people that have been around that have been through a few of these that can help you get through them. But that's a good example of a massive catastrophic, you know, facility emergency. And kind of the equipment, you can You can't look at that and think, gosh, oh my goodness, there's a lot involved with that. And there was. We had to have a mold specialist come out. Our environmental health and safety folks had to clear these rooms. And we literally had students that lived in hotels for 2 months. And so we had to email them. We set up every Friday. They got communication from us on what we were doing and pictures and all this kind of stuff. And we had 1 complaint out of 37 people. And a lot of that had to do with the communication part of this. So with that, I'm going to, I believe, turn it. Actually, I'm on again.
No, but for you. But Josh, we have a question really quick from Joseph, and it's, what does your facilities training look like for professional staff during training time?
Great question. What we do here is I will go in with we have a person that's our building services manager who manages our facilities, and we go in together. I'm responsible for him. He's the expert. I've become very knowledgeable. And so we tackle it together, and we walk the buildings. We show them some common problems that happen. We teach them some strategies to troubleshoot things, and then we always ask them to call up. So our facilities team is used to getting calls, and the reason I tell folks to go right to the scene is because our facility person that takes those calls, if our professional staff are at the scene where there's an issue and it's not an emergency, he could typically talk them through it. And so what we do with our training is we try to teach people where to go and what to look for, so that when we're coaching on the phone, we can kind of coach you on the phone really quickly and solve the issue. A really good example for us, we have 800 apartments. There's an apartment community in our campus. It's got 800 people, 337 units. On a day where it's about 70 degrees as a high and maybe it gets in the 50s as a low, the students sometimes will run their air conditioners at the highest level possible, coldest level possible, during the day. And then at night, what happens when the temperature drops, those units freeze up. Next day, we get a bunch of calls about air conditioners not working. And so what we have to do is tell if it's a Saturday or something, we tell our Res Life team, go in, turn it off, wait 2 hours, turn it back on, see what happens. And unless our staff know where those controls are and know what they're looking for, we can't really help right away. But we've taken a situation where a facility person would have to drive in and look at that, and it might take 2 hours of time. We can handle it in about 10 minutes, send the staff person out, coach them through it, figure it out. And so those are the types of ways that we train people. And our biggest thing here is call up and get consulting. We don't want people making decisions without talking to somebody, because when you make a decision on your own, mistakes get made. And so we don't teach you to be a hero, we teach you to be a teammate, if that makes sense. Let's talk about heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. And so this is fascinating to me, because the manner in which you deliver air temperature control to your residents, is important. And it's important to know how your building does it, because in our campus we have 3 different ways we're accomplishing this. And depending on the way you're delivering it, it really impacts the response and what you can do. And so I'm going to kind of talk through some of the ways people do it. This is not every way. These are the ways that I'm familiar with, and so I'm sure there's better ways, or maybe not better ways, but other ways. So Ball Hall, that building I mentioned, it's old school. It's steam heat, so and no air conditioning. So steam comes from our Citizens front. We have a Citizens Energy in town. They got a steam line that runs into Ball Residence Hall. It feeds the steam system in that building, and it's routed to the radiators that are in each room, and it's either on or off. So we don't turn the steam on in that building until about November. You can control the knob to turn how much is going to be released to the radiator, but pretty much in that building, when it's hot, and when it's off, it's cold. And so we run that steam when it's cold. And then the students will use their windows. If they get too hot, they'll open their windows up. If they get too cold, they'll close their windows. But that is a very ancient way to do it. It used to be really effective. There's just not a lot of individual room control. Pretty much everybody's got the same temperature. There's steam heat and window AC units. That's a way you can do it. So we've thought about this in our Ball Hall building, but we don't like window AC units because it makes the building exterior look ugly, I think. So we've not done that. And in Indiana, you don't get, our residents are really in an air conditioning building or a non-air conditioning building for about 3 weeks where it's really uncomfortable. After that, though, you can open a window up and be fine. So we're not going to put window AC units in that building. But some people do that, and then a student can have air conditioning or the heat when it's turned on. But that heat's still not going to be turned on. With steam heat, you turn it on usually one time is your goal, especially with old systems. You don't want to turn it on and off all the time. You'll end up creating some problems for yourself. One of the things that was really interesting, when I worked at the University of Georgia, I worked on a project where we took the steam lines out. And so what we did was steam lines typically are going to run behind, well, it depends on where your radiator is, but wherever your radiator is in a room, the steam lines are running in the wall behind it. We took the radiators off, took out the steam lines, and installed these electric heating units. And so in this building, we had electric heat, which you could control in your room. You could turn it on or off. And then we had a window air conditioning unit, so you could have that too. Now that's not as efficient in terms of trying to save energy, but it delivered an experience for the students where they had a lot more individual temperature and air control. And if you all ever read your housing survey results, temperature air control is always one of the things people want, and you probably want it too where you are. And so people have tried to deliver this to students in a lot of different ways. And that electric heat and that window AC model, if you're on a budget, it's not a bad way to go. And we thought about that here. We're still kind of biding our time with the steam. A really interesting thing that people are doing right now are either 2-pipe or 4-pipe systems. So there's a 2-pipe chilled water and steam system where you put an individual unit in a room, and it can run heat or it can run air conditioning. In a 2-pipe system, you're just delivering one or the other. So you're delivering cold chilled water for air conditioning for part of the year, and then when it gets cold, you're delivering steam so that you power your heat. The good part about that is it's really everybody has air conditioning, everybody has heat. The bad thing about that is everybody has the same air conditioning temperature and the same heat temperature. There are some newer systems with this. We're building a new housing project and we looked into this. It's less expensive. There are some systems where you can make a change during the day, but it's really tough. If you have one side of your building that gets sun and one that doesn't, and you have air conditioning on, one side's going to be happy, the other side's going to be freezing. What most people are doing if they can afford it is this 4-pipe system. And a 4-pipe system, you can deliver chilled water and you can deliver the steam, the heating ability to every individual fan coil unit. It's called a fan coil unit in the room. And you need 4 pipes because you've got water coming and you have to get water out. So you have to be able to, whatever you're bringing there, you have to be able to get it out of there. And so there's a return to exit that unit. So that's the difference between a 2 and a 4 is you've got to have an exit path to that water. The 4-pipe system was what we're installing in our new building, and it's great because we're going to be able to control that temperature a lot better. And so you can have air conditioning unit and furnace, so that's another one. In our apartments, we have AC units on the roof, and then we have furnaces in the units, and they work together. And that's what you're going to find in a lot of houses that you might, like houses that you live in the community. So those are the basics. Tips for you all. Know your systems, develop an understanding of heating and cooling, learn what typically goes wrong, and coach your residents on how to heat your rooms. And I believe you get a break from me. Abby, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh. So we're going to talk about janitorial closets. It's important to know that closets are going to look different in each area, and supplies may change depending on the needs of the community and university policies. There are going to be some, even within the whole IU system, we use different chemicals or different cleaning solutions depending on what we allow and what we don't, and even the type of communities that we have and what's best for all of them. In general, from an OSHA perspective, chemicals should not be handled by anyone who has not completed HAZCOM training. And that is something that your university should be able to offer you because all of your custodial staff has to go through it. So if you have people who are handling chemicals on your campus, they should be offering a HAZCOM training. It's hazardous communications, and it teaches the universal classification of chemicals. So you should be able to tell by looking at the picture on it, you know, what is involved in the chemical, what sort of protection you should be using when you're using it. Also, all universities have a safety data sheet, which is an SDS, which explains the chemicals, usage, and protective gear required for usage. And all SDS are required to be site-specific, and so you should have just the chemicals for your area, and your custodial staff should be able to tell you where you can gain access to your university's SDS. There may be a paper copy, but for the most part, they are online. And then tips for you all. One, I think it's important to talk to your custodial staff about going into their closets. You might think, oh, I'm just grabbing, a trash bag, or I'm grabbing this deodorizer, but you would really not want someone just popping in your office and taking things without you knowing what's going on. So communicate with them, what you'll be taking out, how much you're taking out, because they probably have a supply there and an inventory of what's there, so make sure that they know what's going on. Put things back where you found them, or if you're having staff that are taking out vacuums or trash cans, make sure that they're putting them back so the people who use them can find them. And then I always tell people, look out for sharps containers. If they're being thrown away in your janitorial closets or held there initially, to make sure that people are very careful not to get hurt or to get any contamination with that. You should know your university protocol and procedures for handling chemicals, and that should be found in that SDS, whether or not you're expected to wear goggles when you're using a certain chemical, or if you're supposed to be wearing gloves, and make sure that you're following it. But really, without proper training, you're really only able to use gloves, trash bags, receptacles, paper towels, and vacuums from a janitorial closet, and that's really just to keep you safe and your residents safe. And so pest control, I'm sure we all get a little, maybe not all of us, but some of us get the heebie-jeebies when we talk about pests, but some of the pests that you should know about that could affect you would be bed bugs, scabies, cockroaches, bats, ants, stink bugs, and spiders. And some of these critters are a little more difficult to get rid of than others. The cockroach picture is the first one, and that's a German cockroach. There are actually 4 or 5 different types of cockroaches, and so the German ones are the ones that are most likely to do the infestation, and they move really fast, and they're also the ones that carry the most disease, and these can be brought in from groceries, from brown paper bags, or they like to hang out in potatoes as well. So they're easy to bring in, but once they come in, they can be really hard to get rid of. And then bed bugs, as Josh mentioned earlier, these can be an emergency situation too, because of the bad press that goes along with them. And so bed bugs are really easy to get. You can get them from going to a hotel, you can get them from a movie theater, you can get them from trying on clothes, and the person before you tried on something or was in the room and they had them. And so they're really easy to get. They can be difficult to get rid of as well. And this is a question that we had earlier, but with bed bugs, we would not recommend moving a student until the treatment has happened. Some students, when they have bed bugs in their room, they just want to be out right away. But if you're going to start moving students from room to room without the bedroom being treated and their belongings being treated, you are just potentially moving bed bugs to another situation. So as much as they may hate it, they kind of need to chill there a little bit until you can get that area treated. The next picture is of a stink bug, and when I talked with our environmental health and safety office, they said that stink bugs are getting to be a major issue in on-campus housing, and so just making sure that windows are sealed and screens are shut to make sure that they're not getting in. Bats are a fun creature to deal with. You have to be careful with them. This is one of those where you need to know what your university's procedures and protocols are with bats, because you really shouldn't be handling them on your own because they could have rabies. And so you need to really know, is it your physical plant staff, your facility staff that comes in and handles that, or is there a vendor that you call or an outside person who comes in and takes care of that? Also, you have to be careful. Some bats are protected, and so you can't just kill them yourself. And so you need to make sure that you're following procedure and protocol with that. So talking about different types of maintenance, you can have quarterly treatments, and that is usually when they're treating like the outside of the building or entryways. Uh, it seems weird, but some treatments may cause an influx of pests for the first couple of days following a treatment, specifically ants. When they are treating right around buildings, if there's any ants that are around there, they're often going to try and come into the building to get away from the pests, and so you just have to be prepared for that. Monthly treatments, we do that in our area. We treat all student areas every month, and we do this to make sure that pests are kept out of student areas, and that it also kills pests that may be brought in by students. Being more towards the southern part of our region, we get to deal with cockroaches every once in a while, and so doing a treatment every month ensures that we are not getting them in our homes. And then an emergency treatment, this would happen, you know, for bed bugs or cockroaches or bats or things like that. Don't move the student until the treatment is complete, and there also may be treatment of furniture. So I would just say, like, you know, when you're talking with students about these pests, and this is going on to the tips as well, you know, just make sure that you're staying calm and that you are educating your residents as needed, and you're not creating hysteria. It can be overwhelming for students because there's a lot of lack of cleanliness associated with pests, and they can get very anxious because they don't want people to think they're dirty. And so talking with them about what pests means and how easy it is for people to get some of these pests, and so to be able to talk through that with them. We would highly encourage you to know what bed bugs look like, as well as what are other signs of bed bugs, and not actually seeing the bug, whether that's you know, the poop on the mattress or the blood stains on it, or what this student's skin may look like. Josh and I were both talking about earlier that a lot of times when students go to health professionals, if a student has bug bites or a rash, they're like, you have bed bugs. You need to go back and tell your housing department you have bed bugs. And so controlling them when they're convinced they have bed bugs, but we know they're not. Know what your university protocols and procedures are. Are you expected to go and check a mattress for bed bugs, or do you have a vendor or like a pest control company that comes in and does that for you? Know what you can handle, like I said, know what you can handle yourself and what you can't. And then if you have a pest control company, I think it's the best thing is to just ask them your questions when you're there, your what if questions. They're excellent resources. And then the link below for pest management, that's from IU's system of environmental health and safety, and it's a great overall explanation of different pests and what happens with them, and what you can do to rid yourself of them.
Thank you, Abby. We have one more topic, and then we'll go into some questions for those that still have them. One of the things that I think trips people up are room turns for summer, fall, spring during the year. These things, room turns are constant, but heavy room turns occur during the summer prior to conference season, especially also in August, right before move-in, and they're important because our housing program makes up a lot of money in terms of our budget with our conference revenue, and we're pushing it every single year, trying to get more and more people in. And what that requires is for us to turn, you know, sometimes hundreds of rooms in 3 or 4 days after students have been in them for 9 months, and then turn hundreds of rooms in August that conference guests have been in for all year, maybe all year, but sometimes you do, you know, a little cleaning when they check in and out, of course, but it's a lot of pressure. And so what we've done, and I think what a lot of folks do, is they have a complete full room turn process, and they've got kind of the hotel style, And so a full room turn for us is going to be, it's going to start with education to residents. And so what we have done here is we start, if move out is in May, we start in April. And we have a floor meeting, and we give our RAs a pre-made bulletin board, and everything about mid-April to mid-May is all about how to move out of your room. We have a cleaning expectation for them. We have a way that they need to get everything out. And then we educate them on the charges that they're going to incur if they don't do it that way. And this has cut our damage charges down from, before we did it this way, we had $30,000 in damage charges. The last 4 or 5 years, we haven't even broken $5,000 in damage charges because we have really gotten on them about how you leave a room. And we also do health and safety checks during the year to help coach them. We inspect the room with them. When they check out, we communicate what may be damaged or what they may be charged with and give them an opportunity to go back. And then we do a clean where we do a maintenance run on that room or that apartment. We look at what needs to be serviced. We paint the room. We repair anything that's been damaged. And then we do a really deep, thorough cleaning of the space. And then we end with a carpet cleaning with a shampoo in the carpet with the company that we use. So we're really intense about how we go through that process and deliver it. And it takes a lot of coordination to do that quickly. And then during the summer when we're doing room terms, what we do is we don't do that whole thing. We'll go in and do a basic clean of the room so that somebody comes in and has, if we do linen change out or something like that, or we wipe down everything, of course, and vacuum. But right before move-in, we go back and we look at those spaces again, and we may not do that full process again, but we're going to do a really deep cleaning, and of course we're going to do that again. And so the room turns are stressful, and if our kind of thought process here at IEPY is if a room is sitting unoccupied, it's not delivering us any value. An empty room is just taking money away from you to be empty. And so we're trying to be aggressive about our budget and making money so that we can put money back into our buildings and keep our resident rent down. So we got to keep people in them. So this is really something that we test our facilities team with. And so what you've got to do and what we have to do is develop a plan for how the Res Life team can get into conference season and very quickly get into kind of facility, put their facility cap on and help organize all these room turns. And so this is something that if you're not, go to some tips. If you are in your building and you're the one that's responsible for your conferences or you just want to really make friends with your facility friends, get involved with this and get your RAs or whatever you might call them, desk assistants or CAs or whatever their title is, get them really involved in the help process. The year that I came in and set new way that we had people move out, the housekeeping team came up and said, Josh, I can't believe this is the easiest we've ever had it. Because students were leaving their futons, their mattresses, not their mattresses, but their bedding, all this stuff in the room, and our staff was having to get it all out. And so we said, no, students are going to get it out, and then the staff don't have to worry about it. They can just go right into cleaning and painting. Ask, if you don't know what a room turn includes. I didn't know until I asked, and so I was a Res Life person. I had no idea what went into it, and so I asked and figured that out, and then it helped me build my process for the Res Life into things. Really ascertain what labor is needed. So we started an overnight orientation. That labor is a lot more than we have. So I've contracted a cleaning company to come out and help us with our quick terms. So we actually have a company that comes out and does those for us. Require your RAs to be part of the process. Make sure the person, this is a big one, make sure whoever is making the charges for damages is actually seeing the damages. One year I had a person that sent people out to do damage charges, and that person never looked at the damages, and they overcharged a ton of people, and I had to have all those charges removed off the bursar accounts because it wasn't fair. And so what we do here is if you haven't seen it, you can't charge it, because if you haven't gone to take a look at it, you don't really know. And you definitely want to be able to back up any charge that you have with somebody where you look really like either money kind of grubbing or you look incompetent. And so I don't let anybody do any charges without going and looking at it. Develop a process that works with your facility team and your conference team. That requires leadership. And what I've found, and this has helped me move up, is that whoever takes the lead, usually people are, one, are happy, and two, that's the person everybody starts looking to. And three, if everybody's looking to you, eventually you become that person that's in the next role. And so these room turns and managing conferences, I know this is room turns, but it's also conferences, these things can really make or break you. And when you think about turns, it involves your facilities, your housing operations team, and your Res Life team. So you can make a whole lot of friends that you need to do your job by doing this really well. And so I think we have a few questions out there, I know.
We do. We have a question from Joseph about, do you paint your rooms annually? And I know at IU Southeast we paint every room every year. it's just something that we do. We have a smaller operation, so it's easy for us, but we also contract out our painting to a company outside of our university.
Yeah, and what we're doing here, Joe, is we are in our apartments. We do that every year because they tend to try to live in them like off-campus apartments, and so you've got little nicks on the wall where they put pens in, all kinds of stuff. So we do paint all of those. In our traditional residence halls, we have a strategy of we want them to look like they're brand new painted rooms. But this year I tried something where we hired student painters and we taught them how to do touch-up stuff. And so we went through some of the rooms where we had some paint issues and we touched them up, and then we came back and we looked to see if it made a difference. And so this year we did not paint every room in our first year residence hall. We tried this touch-up process, and then where we needed to go in and paint a whole room because either the student had torn it up or they had a bunch of stuff on the wall and it peeled off, or that building's old, so there's windows open and there's moisture issues sometimes, and so it's plastered, and so sometimes that comes off. So you've got to do some stuff every year to it. But we had good luck with a really good residence coordinator who understood what we wanted and gave him a team of students, and they went through that building together, and they painted and they did a lot of great stuff, and that saved us some money, but it also gave that residence coordinator a lot of great facility experience for the summer. The one thing I wanted to come back to was the bed bug question, because Abby and I have the same opinion, which is if you can keep a person in the room, then you do it because you don't want to spread the problem. What I often get in response to that is, well, what if they throw a fit? And so that happens. And so our strategy, I have a couple of different strategies that work. The strategy that we try first is if you think about a residence hall room, you think about bed bugs. Typically, a bed bug is going to be either in the mattress, in the bed frame, in the wall, somewhere around that bed. And if it's and often what we will do is we'll move that bed away from the wall a couple inches. We will get them to heat treat every bit of their bedding on the highest heat possible. We have bags, so we bring a heat bag that we heat up. We put it in there for about 4 hours, and that should cook any of the bed bugs. Because at 125 degrees or higher, for 4 to 8 hours, a bed bug will die. They cannot live through the heat. We then vacuum the room to clear the debris so we can see if there's any bed bug activity once we leave. We leave the bed away from the wall. We've inspected the mattress and the box springs if they're there, and if we can see bed bugs, then we're going to have a different response. But often you can't see them. Often you have one specimen. So we have these things called climb-ups. They're these little plastic things that you can put around if you have post beds, they'll fit under the posts. And so we isolate the bed from the wall. We put the climb-ups underneath the 4 bed posts. We then remake their bed, and we tuck the bed so that the sheets can't touch the ground. Because if a bed bug is coming from a wall or a desk, it's going to go down the desk, on the floor, up the bed sheet. The thing about the climb-up is it's going to go for that climb-up. Once it's in the climb-up, it can't get out. And so that's the #1 way we detect bed bugs is these things called climb-ups. And I put my email address. If you want to see a copy of the climb-ups, I'd be happy to send it to you. But we can actually isolate that bed away from the source of the bed bugs. So often the source of the bed bugs isn't in the bed. It's somewhere else in the room. It's on a bag. It could be in the bed, of course. But if it's in the bed, then it's a really bad problem, and you're probably going to have to move them. But most bed bug problems aren't really bad. They've just gotten them. And so somebody to live with bed bugs, you can tell there's so much debris everywhere, you're going to have to probably get them out of there. But for most of our students, if you handle it the way I'm talking about, they don't know much different, and 2, they feel like you've done so much to protect them, they're thankful. We do a heat treat process. You do your heat treat, they can't be in there for that because it's 125 degrees and it has to be at a certain temperature for a certain amount of time, and nobody can sit in that. So we move them to either a hotel, or I've got a bunch of temporary spaces and I'll put them in one of those. We heat treat, we put them back in the room, and then often we will go back and heat treat the room they left just to make sure that we don't leave bed bug things or bed bug specimens in a room that we just put somebody in. So we're aggressive about it. We have had about 20 instances a year for the past 3 years. We've spent about $25,000 on bed bug remediation and equipment every year, but it's well worth it because we stayed out of the press. And when we do get questions, or we have had media poke around, when they talk to me for 5 minutes, like, oh, okay, you got this. It's not a story. It's only when you don't know what you're doing that you really get yourself into big trouble. People get all fired up. They think you don't know what you're doing. So that was a long-winded answer to that. Other questions, you can type them in. I think that might be the best way. I can also, there's a raise your hand function, I believe, that I'm looking at. Let's see if I can do it. Nope, I can't do it to myself, but this is that awkward moment where we can't see your face. We don't know if you have a question. There's a question mark. I see Joe had a question. I think we've answered Joe's questions. Abby, any final comments or anything like that?
No, I'm good.
Awesome. Well, I'll tell you, I'd like to thank everyone. I know we have a few people popping off the call. Thank you for coming and being a part of this. We really appreciate it. Our committee, this is Facilities and Operations Committee, and so we're having a three-part series this fall on webinar, or through the webinar program, and this is one of them. We're doing one in late September with women in facility work, and then we're going to do another one in October with a firm called Brailsford and Dunleavy, and they're going to talk about master planning your house, like master planning for housing. So that's basically setting your housing plan for the next 30 years, and that's going to be really interesting as well. We got a great group for the women in facilities. We've got the lead interior designer from Indiana University. We've got one of the lead facility personnel folks for Purdue. And then we've got the director of housing from Florida State, who used to be the director of housing at the University of Louisville. And so they're going to talk about what it's like to be a woman that works in facilities and leads facility teams. And then the one in October is going to be great. Brailsford and Dunleavy is a firm that does a lot of work around the country. They did a lot of work with Northwestern University on their big housing project that they're doing right now. And so hopefully if you like this, we got a couple more great things coming out in the next month or two. So thank you for your time, and we really appreciate it. Awesome. So what I'm going to do at this point, I'm going to go ahead and stop the broadcast, and if you have any questions, you can feel free to email us. So thank you very much.
Are you still there, Josh?